Hi everybody. I did a video way back in 2013 that has gotten a lot of views and it seems to be really helpful. I actually did it for my students, but I wanted to do an update. And the reason why is because the old one I used Microsoft Word back in 2013, and it seems like so many people these days are using Google Docs. So let's go ahead and do a retake 2018 style with Google Docs. So what this video is going to do is it's going to show you how to format a history paper. You could totally do this at the undergrad level or at the high school level depending on where you are in life. All right, so I'm going to toggle back and forth between a paper I wrote way back in grad school. This is obviously going to be sort of an overdone sample because it's crazy long. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but we can look at what the final product is to give you a sense of how it should look. All right, and actually there's some subtle differences between this sample, which is more of a high school style paper, and what I did in college. All right, so in any event, you want to center your title. And actually, some professors prefer that you do not include your title in the same document if you're emailing it because it might change the page count. Pause. Sorry, my cat's meowing in the background. Be quiet, Bubs. Anyway, I'm not going to edit this out because this is my second take, so let's keep going. You might hear a cat in the background. It's all good. All right, so moving forward, if you go down to the formatting part, you then would want to create probably this kind of information. All right, I tend to encourage my students to add their name, the name of the course, their teacher's name. So that's why my name is twice. Obviously, I am my name. That was weird. Moving forward, you want to have the date of the deadline, so I just created today's date as the date of the deadline. All right, sounds good. A lot of teachers also prefer that you format your page number in a specific way, so I'll show you how to do that. You want to go Insert, and then you want to create a header. All right, so a header is not actually in the text of your paper. I'm actually a big fan of the right-hand side. So then you would want to add your last name and the page number. But actually, what occurred to me is that there's a way that you can insert the page number in a header. Yeah, there you go. Now the problem with this, and this is why I was saying you actually need to make your title page a separate document, is that it's going to number your title page, which you don't actually want. So, now that we're done with this part, I'm just literally going to delete all this info so that you see that your first page should be 1, right? There we go. I'm also going to change the font. I'm a little bit neurotic about this stuff. I'm going to change the font. As a teacher, I'll tell you that I'm not a big fan of certain fonts, so you probably don't want to go with anything that's too fancy, right? In fact, I'll tell you right now that Comic Sans personally drives me up the wall. So I'm a big fan of Garamond. You could do Times New Roman or Cambria, maybe Georgia, but don't really fool around with some fancy schmancy fonts there. It's not really going to amuse your professor, and it's probably not going to help your grade. So in any event, here are some sample citations. All right, this is actually a quote from Martin Luther King, and I did make a citation up here. So this is not actually where this comes from. So in fact, I'm going to redo this guy because it's going to drive me crazy. I don't want to encourage you to just make up citations in a video, right? I was trying to honor Dr. King by reproducing one of his quotes as a citation, but instead, let's just do something else here. So in any event, I'm just going to make up a quote. This is not a quote, but all right, this is not anything you'd cite for a history paper, obviously, but I'm still waking up here in Southern California, and wow, it's a little too late to say that. But in any event, let's just do that. So don't forget to take out the garbage. Let's pretend like that's actually a really historically significant quote that I wrote in some random book, all right, which is clearly not the case. All right, I'm just using myself as an author because that way I'm going to know how to cite everything properly, and it's a made-up source, so I can just make it up, right? So let's go with that. We're going to actually Just pretend like this quote came from this source. I'll explain to you what I'm doing in just a minute. Alright, so the reason why I did that is now I'm pretending like I just cited, don't forget to take out the garbage from an autobiography that I wrote, right? So after the end of the quotation, you have the period at the end of this sentence, you have the end of the quotation, and then you present the footnote, or then you insert the footnote rather, and the way that you do that is through the insert menu, and then you just hit footnote, and the number will automatically show up, and it will stay in order if you rearrange the footnotes, which is a huge plus. So then the footnote shows up at the bottom of the page, and then you include all of the information. And this video is for Chicago citation style. So if you're looking for MLA or APA, you want to stop here. So if you are proceeding with Chicago, this is the way that it's formatted. So you'll see you have author. This is only for the footnote, by the way. You have author, first name first, and then a comma, and then the title of the source. If it's a book, it's in italics. If it's an article, you'd actually create the article, or rather you'd write the article title first. So this would be what it would look like if it's a book. So then you have the publishing city with a colon, and then the publishing company, followed by a comma, followed by the year of publication. One more comma if you're citing from a print source so that you include the page number. If it's not a print source, you do not need a page number because the assumption, if it's a website, for example, the assumption is that it is on the same page because it's an HTML document. Now, if you're reading a source from something like JSTOR, actually, you do want to create a page number for the most part in your citation. And the reason why that is because JSTOR tends to use sources that were originally created in print. So it is still something you want to cite a page. All right, I hope that makes sense. Following one citation. So I'm changing this around a little bit from the sample I had originally created. If you create another citation, and again, these are just samples, not real sentences. Let's pretend that this is another citation, and in this instance, you are citing a paraphrase or a specific statistic, something that is worth citing. If it's a very commonly known term, event, idea, something like the date of a war, or the start of a war rather, and it's very commonly known, like the Civil War started in 1861, ended in 1865, something like that. Do not cite that, but you want to cite, a population growth statistic or something that's very specific. After you create your citation, again, you end the sentence, you do the insert footnote, and then you go down to see where your footnote is. And one other thing I neglected to mention is that you might notice that these footnotes are all indented. The reason why that is let's pretend like this citation is going to be longer than one line long. So now let's pretend like this is actually an article within a book, or maybe even a chapter within a book, okay? So in this instance, okay, so this is the name of an article or a chapter, right? And in fact, to be very technical about it, there we go. And then, so you see that it's in quotations, and the reason why that is because it's an article. And then you'd want to just indicate that it came from a book. All right, and so now the citation is more than one line long, and now you see why it's indented, because you can distinguish this citation from this one. Now, you might see the use of IBID at the bottom, and you might be wondering what that is. So I'm going to conclude the description, the tutorial section, and then show you the sample here. So IBID is when you cite the same source a third time in a row. This is just to avoid looking too repetitive. Even though it is still slightly repetitive, I would actually really encourage you not to continue to cite from the same source over and over and over again and vary your research. But for the purposes of this, you get why we're doing this. In any event, ibid is a Latin phrase that indicates that you're repeating. So then you would do that if you continue to cite it 3 times in a row. Now, if you then cite another source, you do need to return to this second style, which is just the author's last name followed by the page number. One last thing I wanted to add is let's presume that you might be using 2 sources that are from the same author. So, for example, an author wrote more than one book and you're citing both of those books. You would want to not only cite the author here, but you'd also want to indicate which source you are actually citing. And it doesn't have to be the whole title most of the time. In fact, I don't require that. So, okay, cool. Let's take a look at a sample. This was my master's thesis in college. So you see that there's some differences, right? You got some stuff highlighted, or some stuff centered instead of off to the right. I have a table of contents, which is probably not going to be required at the high school level. Maybe if you take an IB class, it would be. And then here are some sample citations. So you see, actually, this is a good example of ibid here. And then I just want to scroll down to the bottom so you can see what a bibliography looks like. Okay, so here's a finished bibliography. It is alphabetized by author's last name. There are ways that you can do that via a Chrome extension, so you should look that up if you want to learn that. It's pretty cool. Then one other thing I wanted to add, I don't know if I have a sample of this, but if you have a source where you don't have an author's name, you then want to alphabetize it by the title instead. All right? And that's pretty much it. So please feel free to comment if you're confused, if you have any additional questions. Another thing I might add is that if you want to look at the old one, if that's more helpful, go for it. It's a little bit shorter than this one. And that's it. Feel free to like and subscribe. I have a whole lot of other goodies. I have lots of flipped classroom videos for my students that might come in handy if you're a history student right now and you're struggling with content knowledge. So thank you so much for your time. I hope this is helpful for you, and good luck finishing up those papers. Thanks, and take care.